We're in the midst of a huge transformation where our peers, communities, and workplaces are all really melding into one. Welcome to Reimagining Company Culture. My name is Christina Giordano, and I'm the Community and Partnerships Manager here at AllVoices, and my pronouns are she, her, and hers. Today, I'm very excited to welcome our next guest onto the show, Karishma Buford. She is the Chief People Officer at OppFi. If you want to start off, Karishma, by telling us a little bit about yourself, including, you, your role, and pronouns. And also, I think it's fun of just this can literally be anything. But when you were younger, how did you answer the question, what do you want to be when you grow up?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, first of all, thank you so much, Christina, for inviting me to this conversation. So excited to join you. And as you mentioned, I'm the Chief People Officer at OppFi. We are promoting financial inclusion for the everyday consumer. It's been a beautiful journey. I've been with the company for 2.5 years, joined when we were Opp Loans and one product, and now we've expanded into multiple product lines. I built the team from 3 to 23 in my 2.5 years and really built the HR and people infrastructure for the team. It's been a fantastic journey, and I'm sure we'll talk a little bit more about that today. In terms of what did I want to be when I was younger, I think, I say this in these conversations, being first generation Indian. My parents, came here right before they had me in college, right time. And so I was born and raised in the United States. And when you're Indian, there's 3 paths you can take: physician, lawyer, and engineer. Usually is the encouragement to go down one of those paths. And like many in my family, I thought I was going to be a physician. And so that's the track I was down, and I was excited about it. At one point I was going to be a pediatrician, loved, the idea of helping kids. And then later in life, I thought I was going to be a psychiatrist, still going down the medical path. And then it all took a detour. So I found my calling ultimately. But I thought, given the cultural dynamics and sometimes pressures, that's what I thought I was going to do. But I'm in the right role now.
And now you found your calling, as you were talking about. How do you think that your personal journey has really led you up into this point, building the team from 3 to 23, which is absolutely incredible as the leader of the people function at OppFi?
Yeah. So I think my personal journey took a turning point in college when I was pre-med engineering. Actually, I was biomedical engineering, thinking I was going to go down the psychiatry path. And I started exploring what that would be like, doing an internship at the psychiatric unit at the University of Virginia Hospital, which is where I was undergrad. Working in the suicide hotline, right?
Wow.
How can I help people? And I had an experience, Christina, that I think I look back on still changed my life and the trajectory of my career. And it was an experience where I remember so vividly. It was a Sunday night, and I get a phone call with a man who had a gun in his hand, ready to take his life after he just put his children to bed.
Oh my God.
And we spent 2 hours on the phone talking about what's working in his life, what's not. He had just dropped his wife off at the ER for trying to commit suicide.
Oh my God.
We had a really amazing, powerful conversation, but when you hang up, you don't know what happens, right? And he had just lost his brother in a car accident, and it was a lot at once, right? So I felt good about the fact that he was going to not take that action that night, right? And so then I go to the psychiatric unit where I was doing my internship, and I started interviewing the patients, which is what I typically had done. And I'm talking to this woman who says, my husband dropped me off 2 nights ago. My brother-in-law just got killed in a car accident. This is his wife. And 2 days later, I see him with his kids in the hospital. And I realized he didn't do it,
Mhm.
right? And that was the moment that probably changed my life, that I want to spend my entire life helping people think differently,
Mhm.
helping people evolve and grow and change. And whatever I can do, whatever role I can be in, where I am able to do that, change minds and change hearts, that's what I meant to do. And so the path ultimately was leadership development and executive coaching and talent management and
Mhm.
helping leaders thrive. And so I decided to get my degree in clinical psychology, and then join the business world, down that executive coaching and leadership development path.
Mhm.
That ultimately, at BA Systems and Groupon, and ultimately led me to OppFi.
Oh my gosh. Well, I mean, first off, thank you for sharing that incredibly powerful and vulnerable story. And two, I think it's interesting to ask people that question because, people don't normally go down a linear path. It's all over the place. So I think these experiences really do shape us. And in terms of
Yes.
changing hearts and minds, so much of our time is in work, the people we work with, what we are, like what the mission of the organization is as well. I think the stat out there is a third of our life is done working. And I want to ask, from your experience, what are really key ingredients to a really like world class employee experience where you're empowering folks to do their best work no matter where they are in the world today?
Yes, love that question. We actually did quite a bit of research around what are the key components to employee experience, what really makes a difference,
Hmm.
and where do we double down? Because there's so many things you can work on. There's so many things you can take. Engagement data, it can be analysis paralysis in terms of how much work there is to do. But what are the areas of employee experience that essentially will give you the biggest return on your investment? And
Hmm.
so I have Kelsey Whitmer on my team, who I hired last year as an employee experience lead. And now she's heading up culture and change management. And she did some of this front end work around, especially when you go from a private to a public company, what really matters. And we've narrowed it down to three big areas that have the biggest impact on employee experience. The first is meaningful work. So
Hmm.
having a sense of purpose, doing mission driven work, recognizing how the work that you do day in and day out connects to the bigger picture, right? That your work makes a difference and has meaning. So I think that's one big area. The second is inspiring leadership. So having leaders who you would follow anywhere, who help you to dream big, right? And want more. And inspire you to be your best and to do your best and to grow. So that is a second area. And then the third area is really a supportive and equitable culture. I think in the last 18 months, in a pandemic,
Hmm.
mental health, balancing work and life in an integrated way, recognizing that employees are whole human beings, not just
Hmm.
employees, that they have a life and there's a life
Yeah.
outside of work. Feeling like your manager has your back, but that you have equity of opportunity in a remote and distributed workforce, no matter where you live. That you still get to have the advantage of your manager giving you exposure and advancement opportunities and developing you. So those are the three areas that we believe really define and can be game changing if done really well in terms of employee experience, a meaningful work, inspiring leaders, and a supportive and equitable culture.
I like that. I like that a lot because I think a lot of times people talk about the impact of leaders on an organization being the kind of culture cultivators and on the front lines. And a lot of
Mhm.
folks, as they should be, are prioritizing just creating an equitable workplace. And so many people are evaluating and reflecting, asking themselves, what am I working on for hours on end? So I think that's a great way to boil things
Yes.
down. Like based on your experience, I know you worked for a lot of global companies and helped build global
Yes.
teams as well. And creating an equitable workplace is an important goal, but I think diversity, equity, inclusion looks different in each country. And in terms of people strategies, things can be a little bit different. So I wanted to ask, kind of in your experience and kind of opinion, what really needs to be from a global perspective, and what do you need to keep kind of stay local based on where you are around the globe?
Right. Love it. So the way that I think about global versus local is really, global is the why and the what, and the
Hmm.
local is the how.
Hmm.
So when we think about global, and I think about my experience at BAE Systems, where my peers were in the UK, Australia, India, Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. We were the global leadership team for talent
Yeah.
management. And so very different cultures on how things get done. And I'll give you a specific example in a second. But the why, we needed to be aligned on the purpose, on why are we doing this work versus just rolling out different programs and initiatives. We needed to be aligned as a global team on the why. And then the what we want to achieve. What is our end goal? What is the vision in terms of what we're wanting to accomplish and what outcomes we are seeking? The how is where the nuances come in, where the cultural diversity and the norms are different. I will, a very simple example. We had a global succession planning process that we used. We used talent review, 9-box data, very classic framework in the talent management space. In the United States, our stakeholders wanted simplicity. Like, dial this down for us, drill it down, streamline the process. We don't add complexity without adding value. Great. So we had the same why and what we were trying to achieve is just identify your top performing high potentials, provide them with development opportunities, provide them with the best rewards. That purpose was aligned globally, but we had to simplify and we had to meet our customers where they were in terms of what they wanted and create a pull versus a push in our processes. In the UK, what I found was they wanted as much detail as possible. Like, give us everything you know about a person when you're presenting a talent profile. Give me, you have a 9-box, but there's a 6.5 in the box 6, right? And so like the level of detail, and that is neither right or wrong. It's just different.
Right.
And that's where the diversity comes in. So having talent leaders who are equipped to deliver to the customer in that level of detail around your processes and your programs is really key on the how. So that's how I think about global versus local. The global is the why and the what, and the local is the how. And you have to have the agility to adapt and translate that how in a way that works for your key stakeholders.
Absolutely. I think having that why and having that context around, like, what are you working towards as a company together? We're all on the same team, and then executing it can look differently based on where you are. I think that's a perfect example of just meeting employees where they are, because they have different needs. People are different, very complex too, and just making it work for the team that you're talking about and just achieving your goals is really important. I think over these past 18 months, a lot of people are talking about processes in terms of innovation and having the opportunity in this huge crisis of a global pandemic and working from home, mental health, as you were talking about. Within these struggles, there's an opportunity to rethink and re-engineer how something has already kind of been done before. Can you provide just like an example of how you've done this at OppFi, whether it's something you've already changed or something you're in the midst of doing as well?
Yeah. So one thing I've not faced in my career is being a CPO at the time of a global pandemic.
There you go.
where you all go home one day and you don't come back for 16 months.
Yeah.
Exactly. You don't come back. In the midst of political divisiveness, racial injustice, mental health at an incredibly low point, right? These are a decade worth of experiences,
right,
mashed into a very short amount of time when you think about people's lifetime. And so a lot of the creativity and innovation came in rethinking what is our role as an employer in the life of an employee, right, and a team member. And so when it comes to mental health, when it comes to equity of experience, when it comes to what support looks like from a manager, is very different when we're now looking into this new world of remote flex, which is not what we were at OppFi. We had 80% of our team co-located in the same office every day in Chicago.
Yeah.
So we were very different from starting point. So one of the ways that I think we've really innovated is, I mentioned Kelsey, I hired her specifically to write the playbook on how we're going to do this thing when we get back, right? And we are in the getting back world where we have reopened our office. Some people are in the office, some people are still remote, creating a remote, flexible, what works for you playbook that actually then helps inform how do we coach and develop managers to live in this new virtual world where you're creating equity of experience, coaching and developing people no matter where they are, even if you can't see them on a regular basis, right? In
Right.
person. What does it mean for like how technology will work and how do we
Hmm.
collaborate across boundaries of geographic and technology? How do we create equity in terms of perks and benefits based on what was a perk once in the office? How do we recreate that if you don't live in Chicago? How do we create an HQ agnostic
Yeah.
experience for folks? And I'll give you a very simple example of how we're bringing, we call it thrive where you work where you thrive. That's our philosophy.
Oh, I love that.
And so, yeah. And that's the tagline for how we think about it. And everything that's connected to this remote, flexible world is connected to this idea and concept of thrive where you work. But a simple example of creating equity. I have a team. I have 4 direct reports. 3 are in Chicago, and 1 is based in Dallas. And
Hmm.
so I always have to be, I'm constantly thinking about how do I make sure that my team member in Dallas gets as much access and
Yes.
exposure and coaching and development
Opportunity.
exactly as those who are based in Chicago, even though I don't see them every day because I'm not going in every day. I do see them live more often than I'm going to see the team member in Dallas. And in fact, we had a team development session a few weeks ago, and she was supposed to be here, and with the direction that everything's going with COVID, playing it more conservative in terms of decided not to travel in. Otherwise, we were all going to be in a room together. But I ended up deciding I'm not going to go into the office and have the 4 of us in the office and she's zooming in. I
And she's
decided to
left
stay
out.
home
Yeah.
and zoom. Yeah, and zoom with her.
Hmm.
Those are simple decisions that I think are so important to continue. It's like these experiences for employees I think are going to be what happens in the subtle moments.
Yeah.
Right. And so how do we educate managers to be really conscious of the impact of their actions and their decisions and their behaviors in this new remote world? So that I think we've been really innovative and leading edge in what we've come up with in terms of thrive where you work and giving a lot of direction and guidance versus reacting, being
Hmm.
proactive about here's what could happen. And here's some thoughts on how you can get ahead of that and what we expect from you as a leader versus waiting for people to feel left out, not included in a meeting, right? Not feeling like they're getting what they need from a visibility standpoint from their manager. Lots of companies, I think, react. And I think we're being very innovative by being proactive in not only writing, but delivering on this playbook in a very new world compared to where we were 2 years ago.
Absolutely. And I think the reality is too that the actions that you're talking about too, and just making the decision to put the meeting fully virtual to make sure everyone felt included, they build up over time. And it's about being super intentional about being inclusive and also making these decisions as you were talking about and modeling that for other leaders at the company
Yes.
as well as we're navigating kind of these waters together.
Yes.
In terms of OppFi's mission and why and what we're talking about, in terms of values. I know OppFi as a company offers a platform that helps power, banks to
Yes.
help everyday consumers gain access to credit. We love to see it. How does OppFi support the financial well-being of your employees internally?
Yeah, absolutely. So whenever we have the opportunity to educate our employees or provide a service that we provide to customers, we do, right?
Hmm.
So we have a fantastic VP of social impact whose role it is to look at how are we serving the needs of our customers through our products and services, but also one pillar of that is around corporate responsibility and the corporate responsibility of taking the solutions we deliver for our customers and providing it to employees, particularly around financial wellness. So we know this consumer often lives paycheck to paycheck, right? Cannot afford $400 in an emergency. Your car breaks down. You have an unexpected healthcare expense. And
Hmm.
so part of what we want to educate and ultimately graduate these customers to better access and better credit and more traditional options is learning about how you can increase your credit score, learning about how managing savings, how you spend your money, how to get out of debt, what are the smart decisions you can make around that. And so we have some partners that we have leveraged for that type of education and wellness. We've also offered that same education to our employees as a benefit and as a perk. We also do education on 401k planning, start early, right? There's so much value in starting 401k 30 years before you need it, 40 years before you need it. And these aren't things that you're necessarily taught in college, right? You're not,
No,
maybe
unfortunately.
it's been a while for me.
Yeah.
Maybe now that's changed, but you're not taught about these things early enough. I think you could learn about it in high school, about what it means to save and build your credit, and how important that is when you make financial decisions for the rest of your life. So we take solutions around education and financial wellness and we turn them inside whenever we can. And so that's something that these kinds of platforms, there's quite a few platforms out there that help with financial education in a personalized and customized way. And we leverage those whenever we can.
Yeah, I think that education piece and access to all the resources that you're talking about too as a company, and having someone kind of focused on that impact internally and externally in the community is really important. At the end of the day, I think companies have a huge platform to make a difference with their, their all of their stakeholders that are involved as well. And I also agree that all of this stuff should be taught in high school or earlier. They're just necessary life
Yeah,
skills.
that's
Um,
right.
I want to ask from your opinion too, as chief people officer, part of the C-suite at a growing company. Do you think that
Yeah.
all leaders, whether they are formal or informal, if they are people managers, do they have a responsibility to always be a coach or a mentor to the individual contributors or people on different teams? Why or why not?
Yes, yes. So my bar for leadership is about as high as it gets.
Okay, I think that's a good
I,
thing. Set the bar
yeah,
high.
that's a good thing, right? That's a good thing. Um, I think that leaders have an honor and a privilege and a responsibility to coach and mentor others. Like it's part of the job. And I think you made a distinction between coaching on your own team and then coaching others potentially outside of your team. So I have two
Yeah.
different responses to that. The way that I think about it, Christina, is nobody should be surprised at the end of the year about their performance review. That's when you're doing your job as a leader. There should
Mhm.
be no surprises on the feedback you're getting. If you have a rating-based system, you shouldn't be surprised at all in your rating. That's when you know that you're a leader who's created a continuous feedback culture and continuous coaching culture. When people are surprised, I always challenge the leader to understand and speak to how much feedback have you given throughout the year? What would you do differently to make sure this person isn't surprised? And what do you
Right.
need to change? So I think that's my litmus test. So are you surprised at the end of the year? Because if somebody is, then that leader is not delivering on the coaching that they need to. I think that, and one piece of that in this, again, new world is like delivering. I remember when we did radical candor with the executive team
Yes.
and our directors and above, the framework, we taught that. And at the time, Kim Scott's guidance was to have the tough conversations in person. Right? That was the back then framework.
Yeah.
There's a new, they've updated it since, and we don't have a choice now. You have to learn to have some of these tough conversations over Zoom. It's not ideal, but that is the new world. And so sometimes there can be an avoidance on that because it's less comfortable to have some of these, it's already uncomfortable to have some tough conversations. And then you have technology barrier right in front of you, but that just means we have to equip leaders to have the courage and the confidence and the tools to be able to deliver this feedback no matter what the setting. So absolutely that is a requirement, I think, and a key competency for leaders to coach and develop their people. I also think that exceptional leaders will go out of their way to coach people and mentor those who are not on their team. I
Yeah, I
think
agree.
that this is a common theme I've seen in every company is two themes: talent hoarding and talent, focusing on your own team. So the talent hoarding is like, I need you on my team. I don't want to lose you. You're so good, versus thinking about the greater good. If I have somebody on my team who's super high potential and wants to do something else, I would much rather have them join the other team than lose them from the company altogether.
Right.
There's a way to have open, transparent conversations about moving talent where they want to go, right? So this talent hoarding concept, but also having a greater good mindset, like as a leader, especially as an executive team member, what are you doing to coach people who are not on your team? Because that's what's best interest for the company. Like that's my bar for at least the most senior leaders, is going out of your way to really build the careers of talent across the company. And it's not, while it's not going to have a direct impact on your performance of your team, it's going to have a global impact, right? A global impact across the company. So I have a very high standard for leaders, and particularly senior leaders.
Well, I definitely like that standard. I think as a leader and as someone who, who's receiving either mentorship or just guidance as well, when someone is investing in you in your career, when someone is definitely not. And I think it's definitely part of that job as well. And just to foster those relationships across the company. I do want to go back to radical candor and having hard conversations as well. It
Yeah.
can be a little, hard to give constructive feedback, especially to if you are someone who's new joining the organization, if you're working with a different manager, if you don't work with someone, as often a time, you're not sure kind of what relationship you have. But do you have any kind of advice, or how do you encourage employees to give critical feedback, especially in the environment that we're in right now?
Yes. So I think the key ingredient for upward feedback, lateral feedback, 360 feedback that's live is psychological safety.
Hmm.
People need to know that they can share feedback, and it doesn't mean the relationship will be broken, right? If
Right.
anything, the relationship will be strengthened. And I think that there's, in any company, variability in terms of the level of psychological safety. There
Hmm.
is in a company. So the teams that have very high psychological safety flow feedback in every direction, and that's awesome and great. When there isn't psychological safety, we know that feedback isn't going to flow upwards. That is a very rare situation from my experience. And I think, again, it goes back to what's the leader's responsibility in creating psychological safety. And
Hmm.
so one of the ways that I've done it is really talking about failures and mistakes and what have I learned, and being vulnerable. To your point earlier,
Yeah.
vulnerability is so key. Asking for feedback. My VP of Talent DEI, Michelle Best, brought in this framework that we use around brilliance and blunders. So what was
Yeah.
your brilliant moment? What was your blunder moment? What
Oh,
did
I
you
love
learn from
that.
it? So we do these exercises at the end of last year, which makes me think we need to do this again, is with the whole people team. We did what are you most proud of in this past year? And what are the redos? What are the mistakes that you made? What did you learn from them?
Mhm.
And I went first, right? I went first because I have to model it. I have to
Yeah,
model
set
that
the
I can talk
example.
about my mistakes. I can talk about what did I learn from them? What am I going to do differently? And I'm all about making mistakes like that. We have to create a culture where you can have enough flexibility to make a mistake and then learn from it. And I always challenge people, what did you learn from it? Like, it's not about making it. What did you learn from it? Anybody in my team will tell you I'm a broken record around, okay, what did you learn? And that's what I expect, right? I don't expect
Hmm.
anybody not to make mistakes, but I expect them to have a very clear understanding, and I can be a partner, and the leaders on my team can be partners with the team members around, let's figure out what did you learn so that you can be more in the future. If you don't have this kind of environment, Christina, I don't think feedback happens in all directions.
Hmm.
I don't think feedback happens in all directions. So it's very, very important to create that kind of setting and be a model,
Hmm.
and asking for feedback. So there was a Patagonia article that came out, I want to say it last year, where they did a study that found out those who asked for feedback had a higher annual bonus payout. And it was correlation, not causation, right? The
Yeah.
correlation is those people who are asking for feedback tend to be continuous learners, having a learning mindset, actually versus a performance mindset actually leads to better performance than having a performance
Absolutely.
mindset, because you're thinking about what can I do better? What can I do better? And so you perform better. That was the correlation that they were seeing at Patagonia. And so we've, in our quarterly conversations, have asked employees, ask for feedback from 2 people, 3 people every quarter. So we start creating a culture where we're asking. And if leaders are modeling the asking, that is another way, right? Again, you have asking and you have psychological safety that we've been encouraging. And I think we have more work to do on psychological safety for sure, that we've been encouraging, to your question, feedback going upwards, and feedback going to peer feedback in particular.
I mean, we definitely believe in psychological safety and creating that culture of feedback. You need to have trust, and you need to create those intentional relationships with folks and ask people and not be afraid for the constructive feedback as well. I think that's a really interesting kind of study too, in terms of people who seek it out really want to do better for themselves and also the company at large. I know
Right.
we've been talking about a bunch of different problems and solutions and strategies around the world of work and your work at OppFi and your journey here. And a lot of
Yeah.
people over this past year have kind of said that people, HR, like culture leaders have really been the end all be all person that they go to say, hey, can you fix this for me? Can you fix this? Can you fix this? But
Yeah, yeah.
what's the next like problem or solution you're currently trying to solve?
That is so great question. I'm like, how can I pick
What is
one?
one of them? Yeah.
That is so, I think it's actually tied to what I've mentioned earlier, that ties to a supportive and equitable culture in this new distributed workforce. I think the
Hmm.
equity piece of, we're getting this question of, will I be forgotten? Will I be seen? Will I have the same opportunities? Will I get a chance at a promotion if I don't live in Chicago? Like, these are
Right.
all very important questions that leaders have to be empowered to be able to answer. Otherwise,
Hmm.
we can't make it work. Like, then if we can't answer these questions with confidence that your opportunities will be just as great no matter where you live, um, if we can't answer these questions, then we are not going to be able to make this model successful. So we don't have all the answers to that, but I think we need to continue thinking about, what do leaders need to be successful in being able to not only answer those questions, but then walk the talk and
Hmm.
deliver on those answers for employees. So figuring that out, what that looks like. And then I think the world of benefits is evolving quickly. I mean, it evolved huge ways. I mean, we subsidized childcare and mental health last year. I've never done that.
Yeah.
It just was not a thing. I mean, there's lots of companies, very, very large companies have on-site daycare and things like that. But and we have EAP, all companies have EAP through insurance, but we didn't subsidize Talkspace, right? And Healing Clouds and these other services, because the need completely changed. And so the idea, as I mentioned, of seeing the employee as a whole person, we're in a completely different space. So keeping up with the changing face of benefits, and when you were in person and had free food or subsidized food options, like, if you're not in the office anymore, what does that look like for the person that can get a similar benefit, even though it might not be the exact same, right? We
Hmm.
can't deliver full meals for you 2 times or 3 times a day, right? That's not a viable option from a business standpoint. But how do we create a comparable benefit for
Hmm.
people in office versus people in the office, sometimes remote, sometimes, or people some 100% remote? We're building the plane as we fly it on this. Is we're
Yeah.
seeing how are benefits evolving in our space and in the world in general, and where can we be most competitive? We're not at the size and ability at this point to do everything. We have to pick what makes sense and prioritize what's going to have the biggest impact on our population. So figuring this out and having a really compelling benefit strategy for this distributed workforce is going to be a big problem and opportunity that we want to solve for 2022.
Yeah, I think the benefits conversation is really interesting because I think a lot of companies are thinking about things like childcare, mental health, how to kind of support employees who are caretakers as well. And I think making them as inclusive and accessible is really important. So I think that's interesting that that's something that you're working on right now, and
Yeah.
knowing that it's a process. Just switching to, I always like to kind of ask this question as well, in terms of, is there anything for you in terms of what is something that folks would be surprised to know about you or your journey?
Yeah. So I think the most surprising is probably that I have three little babies that are 6, 4. They're always gonna be my babies, even when they're 26, 4 and 4 months.
Oh,
Uh,
wow.
yeah, so it's a full house here, and it's a balancing act. And people, it is actually very interesting, Christina. When I would tell people that I'd meet, or colleagues that I had 2 children, that wasn't that surprising. But something about the third is
You
very
with hands. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. It's the no, you're going from, one-on-one to zone defense. Like, there is something about, the world is like 4 people, right? It's an even number. You don't have to
Yeah.
use the third car in the roller coaster. Like, there is something
Yeah.
about that is like, the third does it's been easier than I thought it would be. Honestly, a lot of
Yeah.
people say like the jump to the first one is the most challenging, and then 2 to 3 is like, it's a lot easier. And so I've fortunately found that, but I think people are surprised when they hear about that balancing act. But I love it. Like, I mean, I love challenges. I thrive on challenges,
Yeah.
and growing and developing, and it is a challenging balancing act to be, an executive, and doing great meaningful work, and then being present for my kids. Like, it's an
Absolutely.
everyday balance that I try to strike, and some days I do it successfully, and some days I'm not successful, and I just have to figure out how can I be more successful, versus beating myself up for the days I'm not. And so I think that's probably one of the surprises in terms of people's reaction. That, and that I'm an only child, but I don't think that's that surprising once you get to know me for a little bit. Yeah.
There you go. There you go. I
Yeah.
think that's funny. I'm also an only child, but I
There
think
you go.
it's just
So you
it's
know
just
what I'm
funny
getting
people's
at.
reactions. Yes, absolutely.
Exactly.
But I think that definitely makes sense. Never a dull moment in your household for sure.
No, not at all.
Um,
Not at all.
is there anything that you like I didn't ask that you want to share with our audience, or just like 1 to 2 key takeaways you hope that they bring with them after listening to our kind of episode here today?
Yeah. So I think the 2 takeaways that would be important is, 1, prioritization. It's
Hmm.
so easy in this space when you're flooded with so much opportunity, and you're seeing what everyone else is doing, is really, if everything's important, nothing's important. So
Yes.
really figuring out what's most important for your employee population, for your customer base, and whatever that looks like. Um, Deliver to and prioritize what's most important, because otherwise you're just not going to have the impact, and you're not going to have the return, because you're going to be okay or good enough in multiple domains versus exceptional in a few, and decide what those few are. Be really clear about them. Use data, talk to your customer base, whatever that looks like. And when I say customers, if it's recruiting, it's your candidates and your hiring managers, it's your employees from an employee experience, whoever your customer is, really understand that and figure out what's going to be most important, and then double and triple down on those areas. And then hold leaders to the highest bar. Hold leaders to the highest bar. Really think about the balance of IQ and EQ when you're making hiring and promotion decisions.
Hmm.
I think that finding that balance is hard. There's not a ton of leaders out there that have a really nice balance of the 2. And when that isn't balanced, especially on the EQ side, that is, I think, much more coachable.
Yeah.
Make sure that they're open to feedback. The goal isn't to find the perfect mix, because you're not going to do that very often. It's 1 in 100, 5 in
Hmm.
100 that have the right balance of 2. Is the person who needs to develop in a certain area coachable? Are they open? Are they self-aware? Are they willing to adapt? That's what matters at the end of the day. So keep that bar for leadership really high when you make hiring and promotion decisions, and then give people the opportunity to be human, and make sure that they hire people who want to grow and have a growth mindset. Because if you have that, and they have potential, like that's a killer combination. So those are the two things I would say are important takeaways that I think about a lot.
I love that. I think the importance of leadership is really important. People managers and their impact on company culture. Feedback is always so important. And creating the environment that fosters a conversation around constructive feedback is really important too, especially as we're thinking about the workplace and always wanting to do better and things of that nature. Karishma, thank you so much for being on Reimagining Company Culture.
Thank you so much, Christina. It was awesome.
Yes, I really enjoyed our conversation. And for folks who are listening, as a reminder, AllVoices believes in the empowerment of everyone at a company to speak up. And we know that it's a requirement for the organization to succeed. Have a good rest of your afternoon, everyone.